Hi, Carolina. How are you?
Hi, Annette. So excited to be here with you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure having you. I thank you so much for joining me today. Our viewers are out there and they're always looking for something different to taste and also learning some techniques. And we're trying to get different dishes from regional places, and it's great, with your background. I really appreciate the two dishes. You did a Portuguese almond tart and a Portuguese fish stew that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So they were really exciting. The first thing I want to do is I want our viewers to know a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself and your culinary experience.
Okay, so well, I'm Caroline. I come all the way from Portugal, and actually, cooking is my second career. I was an attorney or lawyer for 10 years, but I got to the point where I the cooking was always my escape. I never fulfilled myself in a law career, and then I started thinking, what if cooking was the job instead of being my hobby? So I kind of pursued that, never looked back, and was the best decision I made because it is true. Once you love what you're doing, you never work because you just, there's bad days and good days, but you always enjoy it. It's always exciting for me to get in the kitchen and do something. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
And
So,
I moved to the US actually to go to culinary school. I didn't do it in Portugal.
okay, okay. And your training, so you went to culinary school in the US. What about your training? Where did you complete your apprenticeship or any other trainings that you had?
So I came to Scottsdale in Arizona to the Cordon Bleu to do a 2-year program in baking and pastry. And then I kind of did my externship and then continued to work in the Four Seasons in Scottsdale as well. So that was kind of the beginning of my career. I worked there for 2 years. Then I went to London also with the Four Seasons.
Mhm.
After that, I ended up in cruise ships as an American test kitchen host doing cooking shows for a live audience.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how was that? I mean, one thing is working in the kitchen, another thing is actually cooking in front of an audience and teaching them. How was that experience? Was it,
It,
nerve-wracking?
it wasn't. I always make, a joke that I'm too stupid to be nervous. But it just comes natural. I really enjoy doing the shows. Well, first of all, America's Test Kitchen always built the shows in such a way they made sense. So it was kind of an easy flow. But on the other hand, I do love being in front of an audience and cooking and sharing because for me, it's just really about sharing the information. I don't believe in secrets in the kitchen. At least not in the recipes. So I am excited when people do the recipes and they share and they said, oh, I learned something and improved my cooking skills. So for me, I never felt nervous. So it's always exciting to be there, even when things failed.
And they sometimes do, right?
And they say, and that's part of it to show that, even professionals, things do fail and it's not the end of the world. And I do think people always feel intimidating. Oh, I can't be perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's just food tasting good.
Oh, that's good. So now talk a little bit about the dishes that you selected. Let's do the Portuguese almond tart. That looked absolutely delicious, and I know you said you were going to send me some in the mail. I'm still waiting.
Yeah, it kind of, it disappeared pretty fast here. It's a very, I mean, our desserts are very sweet and very rich in Portugal, and this is no exception. But it's also very easy because you have flour, sugar, butter, and almonds. And actually, in the south of Portugal, we do have a lot of almonds. We produce a lot of almonds, so it's kind of relate with the produce we have in our country. And I like that recipe because it's a home recipe, but also a restaurant one. So you can eat it both, both ways. It's kind of you go to a family gathering, you'll find some sort of version of it. But if you go to a high-end restaurant, you might have a different interpretation, but you still have it there. So,
Nice. Okay.
and it's
Now,
very
we have
yummy.
viewers that don't do almonds, right? Or they have
Yes.
allergies. Would you just scratch that recipe altogether, or would you substitute an ingredient for the almonds?
Well, usually when you have an almond allergy, you also have a peanut one. But in the case you don't, you can use peanuts. Otherwise, I would just, it's kind of hard to replace the almonds for something else. You can use any other nut if other nuts are not a problem.
Mhm.
But other than that, just do a different recipe.
Yeah, right. Okay. Is that something that, on a scale of someone who is just starting to cook, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being difficult,
Hmm.
how easy is this recipe to make for a beginner?
I think it's fairly easy. I would give it a 2 because you have to unmold it at the end, and I do advise a bottom that comes out, so you don't have to flip it. And it does work with hot sugar, and so those are the tricky parts. But other than that, it's not like hard. You don't have to have a specific skill. So I'll give it a 2. Yeah. And
Okay.
even if it comes out wrong, it will still be good. So that's the best part.
So that means I can easily do this recipe.
You can,
Okay.
you can.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's the beauty of desserts. Even when they come out wrong, you still can eat them. They're still sweet. They're
Still
good.
good enough to eat. So now let's get into your fish stew, your Portuguese fish stew. Why did you select that? I mean, there's so many different traditional dishes, and I said cook whatever you like, but why did you select the fish stew?
Well, fish is such a big thing in our cuisine in Portugal. Half our country is coast, and the more dense populated areas are near the coast. And for example, even during this quarantine, and I talked with my friends and family, what everyone was missing was fresh fish. And I've traveled to Portugal on purpose to eat fresh fish. So I do think it's a very Portuguese thing. It's something when you go there and people eat out, they always remember the fresh fish, because we don't, when you ask for fish in Portugal, it doesn't come like a fillet. It comes the whole thing.
The whole thing, right?
With the tail and, the head and fins and, and you are the one in your dish that take that out and eat the flesh. So I do think fish is a very Portuguese thing. And that's too, it's so easy, but it's so flavorful. It's really amazing. And I was doing it, and when I lift the lid of the pot, the smell just, it took me back to the beaches in Portugal. So I do think it's very much our essence, that fish, that relation with the ocean. It's very Portuguese. I do think it sums up a lot of what we are.
That's excellent. Now, do you find some of these, now that you're here in the States, do you find that some of these dishes, you're having a hard time sourcing some of these ingredients? Is it an easy find for some of them, or do you feel like, do you have family that ships you ingredients over from Portugal?
Every once in a while, I do get a shipment of canned tuna. You cannot find decent canned tuna other than Portugal. It's, I've tried, maybe Spain, but Portuguese is better. So every once in a while, I do get canned tuna. Coffee, hard coffee, it's also better. And olive oil. Some ingredients you don't, like the codfish, the salted codfish, which is something also very traditional. I cannot find here in Arizona. I don't get it shipped. I know people that do get it shipped. I eat them when I go back home. I eat all those things. It's not easy to get the ingredients, but you also get creative. A lot of the flavors come from the seasoning, not the protein or the ingredients themselves. So you always manage a way to turn your things into Portuguese food.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. What is one of your favorite dishes to make at home?
For me to make?
Yes.
I love making bread. It's not necessarily bread. Any Easter dough, the fact that it's a living creature, and it grows, and you have to be respectful of that nature. It never ceases to amaze me. So I love making Easter doughs, sweet doughs, or just bread. I love making it. Yeah.
That's great. Now, how many different cuisines did you go to school for? I know that you specifically were a baker. Was there anything in the baking field that you found, okay, I could elaborate a little bit more and bring this cuisine into it, or change it a little bit? Talk to me about your favorite cuisines.
So I think in school, well, we all learn, the French pastries, which is kind of the base for everything. And obviously what I worked in my professional career was always a more Western desserts, American, British, French. But I think then you can play with, for example, the Asian flavors. When you start adding matcha or miso into the desserts, it kind of gives you a little bit of an Asian or something that's different. So I did a little bit of that. One of our restaurants we had in London was actually a fusion Japanese Chinese restaurant. So we did have, the sesame ice creams. So you can, with the, I would say the French bases, the traditional culinary skills, you can always play with flavorings. And being in Arizona, then you start including, you know, the Mexican influence using avocados or mezcal and all those flavors. You just do a base, but then the flavorings, and that's the fun part of also pastry. You can, you know, if you use a certain chili, obviously you will be reminded of more Mexican you know, orientation. If it's a different spice, you go Asian. So it's kind of fun to do. If you put cinnamon, it's Portuguese because we put cinnamon in
everything.
So, in everything. We just love our cinnamon. So yeah, it is fun. I think once you master the basis, it's all about creativity and just, you know, picking up different ingredients wherever you go.
Wow, that's interesting. I do have a question from one of our viewers, and it's a very interesting one. If they were to ask you to reduce the fat and the sodium in a menu, what would you do to maintain the flavor of the quality of the dish? I thought it was a very interesting question.
Yeah, but especially because, well, sodium, which is salt, and fat are major flavor boosters. They're most the ingredients that, you know, allow you to experience the flavor. So it's kind of hard to replace them. But I do think fresh seasonings, fresh herbs and spices, and fresh ingredients to start with, because if you eat something that's really fresh and ripe, you don't need much else to add to it. So I would definitely go that way. Even in desserts, you know, we rely a lot on butter. So when you reduce the butter, if you add, you know, fresh strawberries to something like, or fresh basil, then you have a different flavor layer that you don't not so concerned about, oh, there isn't that much butter there. So I do think relying on fresh ingredients really helps to make your cuisine flavorful without, you know, the salt and the fat.
Right. Of course, yeah. It's a question I get asked all the time, you know, table salt, kosher salt, sea salt, what's the best salt, or how do you reduce it? And so it's always interesting to get.
There's no replacement for salt. That's one ingredient. There isn't. I mean, there's like seaweeds that people add that add the saltiness to it, but they still have salt because they come from the ocean, and the ocean has salt. So it's really an ingredient with no replacement. Also, what happens is people, when they have a low sodium diet, your palate starts to adjust. So you start to learn to appreciate different flavorings, not just the salt. So it's, you know, you don't reduce it overnight, or maybe you have to, but then you'll adjust and you start noticing other things in your food. But then again, you know, spice it up with other spices and herbs, and you still have something nice to eat.
Excellent. So I know that you have been working diligently at home, and you've been baking and creating wonderful dishes, and you have your YouTube channel. And I need you to add you know, subtitles so that I could understand it, because it's all in Portuguese.
It is in Portuguese.
Tell us about, you know, why you decided, you know, to create this channel, and what your goal is behind your YouTube channel.
You know, I always had an idea of making these videos, but actually it started when the quarantine was implemented in Portugal, which was a little earlier than here in Arizona. I was like, I have a lot of friends that don't know how to cook. So I'll just help them, and I'll, you know, share an easy recipe and show them how it's done. And then there was a lot of, you know, good feedback from that, like, oh yeah, help, oh, I made your recipe, was so good. And then I started making more just to really help people cooking. And then it obviously, as a pastry chef, I always go towards the sweets and the desserts. So it's more about sweets now, but it started like that. And I have such good feedback of people, oh, I did it and it worked out, it was so good. And I just, you know, keep doing it. My goal, I think, is just, it's really about sharing knowledge and what I know. Sometimes I think, oh, everyone knows what I know, but then I realize they don't. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should share this because people think it's complicated, but actually it's not. It's super easy. Let me do this and show them how easy it is to do that. So that's kind of, that's, I think, my goal. I think back really deep, I have a teacher soul. My mother was a high school teacher, and I do think have a little bit of that sharing pleasure. Like if a student, like someone does something better than I do because I taught them something, that makes me happy. So I don't need to be the best. I just like to share my knowledge with everyone else.
Great. That's great. Do you find at home that you guys are gaining a little bit of weight with all these pastries and sweets?
Well, it does help that my husband is a professional athlete, so he kind of eats most of it and burns most of it.
Nothing goes to waste.
Yeah, nothing goes to waste. And I freeze a lot, so we don't need it all in one sit. And I do have this thing, if you want something, you should make it from scratch.
Yes.
So I think the process of making it from scratch, you know what's in there, and it's most of the times it's not as bad as you think. It's not as bad. If it's, I always use fresh ingredients, and I'm very, thoughtful about what I do and how I make it. So, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Carolina, thank you so much. Our viewers.
Thank you, Annette, for having me.
I can't wait for everyone to try these dishes at home. And for those of you out there, if you are looking for any culinary tours, a mother-daughter experience, or friends getting together, if you have something on that bucket list that you want to cross off with a little bit of culinary twang in it, please let us know. Contact us at wepatravel.com. That's WEPA travel.com. And from my corner of the kitchen to your corner of the world. Thank you.
On this video, I'm going to show you how to make a Portuguese almond tart. It has this buttery crust, and then it has this caramelized mixture on top with the almonds. Portuguese sweets and desserts are traditionally very rich and very sweet, and this is no exception. But the thing is, it's actually a popular dessert both within the family. Every family has kind of its own twist on this recipe, but also a restaurant. If you go in a coffee shop in Portugal, or having lunch or dinner in the restaurant, you might also find our Portuguese almond tart. And it's quite simple. It has like half a dozen ingredients. So I'm going to start by making the crust, or the base of our almond tart. I have some butter here, and we want the butter to be nice and soft. And we're going to add some sugar. And the amount is pretty much, almost the same amount of everything, not exactly, but pretty much rich, as I said. So butter and sugar, combine the two together. And I'm also going to add some zest of lemon. Some recipes don't add lemon, some have lime or modern ones, but a lot of them also have lemon, and I do think it gives some interest to the recipe, kind of a counterpoint to the sweetness and the richness. So I'm just adding the zest to the mixture, and by doing it at the beginning, you really release the oils from the zest of the lemon, making this mixture really flavorful. Lemon and almonds also go really well together. In the meantime, I have the oven preheating at 180 or 350 Fahrenheit, so 180 Celsius, 350 Fahrenheit. And we're going to first cook the crust and then add that caramel almond mixture that we're going to do next. But now I'm going to cream the butter and the sugar. Our butter mixture and sugar is nice and fluffy, very light. Now I'm going to add the egg. The egg is incorporated with the sugar and the butter, so now it's time just to fold in the flour and just a splash of milk. And when you add the flour, you want to be more gentle and not just whisk so roughly as you do with the sugar and the butter. So I incorporated all the flour and also a little bit of milk, so everything is in our batter. So it's time to put it in a pan. I have a cake pan. As I said, usually a cake tart pan would be best. But as you can see, it's not a lot of batter. And that's it. We just need a thin crust, and then we want the almonds and the caramelized sugar. And that filling, or top, not exactly a filling, we're going to make while our crust is baking in the oven. So the crust is in the oven, and it's going to bake 10 to 15 minutes. And while that happens, we're going to make our toppings that we're going to add and then put it back in the oven. So I have some butter here. I'm going to add some sugar. And we just want to cook this slightly, not a lot. Just going to turn on the heat. Some milk. There we go. And then our sliced almonds. And this usually is the way the almonds are served in this tart, kind of chopped like this. And now we're just going to bring this to a boil, let it simmer a couple of minutes, and then it's ready to go on top of our tart. So both the sugar and the butter are melted, and I'm pretty sure you noticed the huge amount of butter it's in here, but that's just the way it is. So now what we want is to pass our spatula and kind of leave like a trace. It doesn't close immediately. As you can see, it's not there yet. So once I pass my spatula, it closes immediately. So it needs to bubble up, evaporate some of that moisture, and then when it kind of leaves that trace, then it's ready to go. So our mixture, as you can see, it's much drier, and when I pass my spatula, it kind of leaves a trail. It closes, but it doesn't close as fast as it was in the beginning. So that's pretty much what we want by now. So I'm going to take our tart from the oven, which should be halfway baked, and then it's going to finish baking with all this almond, sugary, buttery topping on top. So our Portuguese almond tart is ready. It was in the oven 20-25 minutes until it gets this dark brown color. And here it is, ready to be enjoyed, our Portuguese almond tart. Today we're going to make a Portuguese fish stew. Half Portugal is actually borders are with the ocean, so we obviously have a culture that's very intimate with the ocean, a lot of fishermen, a lot of fish in our food. And this was actually a dish that was made by fishermen on the boats when they went fishing. So the kind of little fish and the fish that wouldn't sell so well, they would cook them for their lunch. And they actually would take the extra stock from this dish and boil some pasta or use some bread for dinner time. It's kind of the Portuguese version of a bouillabaisse. It's actually quite easy to make, so you can use whatever fish you have. You can also use some shellfish as well. Today I have some codfish, some salmon, some shrimp. Not exactly the most Portuguese fish, but they can do as well. So everything you can use. So let's start by just a little olive oil, and by a little we always mean a lot. And start adding our ingredients in layers. So onions go first, and then the garlic. So you just stack everything on top of each other, so you don't have to cook anything first. Everything cooks at the same time. Our tomatoes go, and then our potatoes go on top of the tomatoes. I'm just gonna use a spatula and kind of nestle everything. Then go our peppers, and I start hearing a little drizzle from the olive oil warming up. Let's season with some salt. There we go. Also some pepper. Parsley goes in, and then let's just kind of refresh it with some white wine, some extra virgin and extra olive oil. Got a good dollop. And if you feel it's a little on the dry side, you can actually add some fish stock or just water. And sounds good. And now it's kind of simmering. I'm gonna lower the heat, cover it, and that's pretty much it. We're gonna count like 15 minutes, and then we'll add the fish because the fish cooks faster. So it's time to add the fish. This is one of those dishes, once you cover, you don't want to check on it or uncover. It has to be covered so it really steams well. So let's see what's happening inside. Oh, and I wish the smell could go through the camera. So now I'm just gonna add the fish in, the spatula. So we'll add like 5 minutes or so. This is fish that cooks fairly quickly, and it's already kind of cut into small pieces. So we'll let it cook for 5 or up to 7 minutes, and then it's ready to serve. So let's see and wait 7 minutes. Fish stew is ready. The fish is cooked. It only takes like 7 minutes. So let's see how it looks. And the smell is just something. It just brings me back, or takes me back to Portugal in a second. So it's time to serve. So you want a little bit of everything. So you want the potatoes, the peppers, the onions. Here we go. And you have a lot of stock. The potatoes are cooked as well because they take longer. That's why we start with them first. And the only thing missing is some fresh parsley on top, just to give a little freshness and green. And obviously we need something to soak up all those good juices from the fish and the vegetables. Something like some Portuguese cornbread, or broa as we call it. So, and here we have it, our Portuguese fish stew.